So today I wanted to talk about taking 100% responsibility for our lives. So as you may have read in the newsletter, I've been taking a course called Conscious Leadership, and it's based on a book called The 15 Commitments to Leading a Conscious Leader Life, which I encourage you to get. I think it's very good. It's sort of a condensation of a lot of great leadership and consciousness teachings that kind of bring spirituality and practical life together. And I thought it would be a fun series to put together on the 15 commitments. So I'm going to give that a shot. The first and foundational commitment is taking full responsibility for our lives, not blaming ourselves, events, and others. In today's gospel, Jesus is teaching us this very famously when he says, take the splinter out of your own eye before you want to take the log out of someone else's. And it's no accident that Jesus is using the image of our eyes, because it's got a spiritual implication about the eyes, right? He's talking figuratively about the eyes because he's talking about our ability to see a spiritual path, to shift from blame to responsibility. So in this conscious leadership course, they share this concept of acting above or below the line. It's an interesting concept. Above the line is when we're proactive, and below the line is when we're blaming and we're responding out of fear. And I thought it corresponded nicely to Swedenborg's states of that we're in tension between the good and evil forces in our own life on a daily basis. The fact that Jesus taught us 2,000 years ago to avoid looking for blame in other people and focusing on ourselves, and it's something that we're wrestling with today, is fascinating. It's still a big deal because all of us do this. All of us actually blame. So why do we blame? Well, the primary reason that we blame is out of fear, and also because we want to be right. So it's our natural tendency to kind of approach the world with our plans on how we see how it should be, and we kind of project onto it, this is how others should be, this is how our country should be, and this is how my day should go. But the world that's in our mind, this perfect world that we want, is actually an illusion. It never really works out the way we want. And when it doesn't, which it will always happen, it will not go the way we expect, we become afraid. We look for reasons why. We want to explain why the world isn't matching up to what we had planned, and we become fearful, frustrated, and even angry. We feel like we don't really have any control. So a natural tendency in this situation is to blame. We want to make clear to ourselves, and we want to make clear to others that the failure that we're experiencing, the things aren't going right, it's not our fault. And we want to assign blame, and we do it primarily in three ways. We either blame events, we blame other people, or we blame ourselves. So blame avoids the responsibility, and it takes away our chance to really see that log in our own eye. So here's a bit more on each of those three ways that we blame. The first one I said was we blame events. We see ourselves as victims to events so we're not responsible. In this case, we feel sorry for ourselves, for forces outside of us that are making things happen that we don't like. I don't know how often to confess that I've said to people, I'm sorry, but traffic was terrible. So how many times do we kind of blame it on something outside of ourselves with current events? It's not our fault. Second way we blame is to find villains. This is the favorite way to do it. We find other people, those people over there who created the problem. Those people over there are causing the problem, and if we could just get rid of them, everything would be great. American political culture thrives on this, and all you have to do is watch a political debate of either party or either group, and you'll watch very quickly there will be, we're victims of their villains, and let's join forces to fight those villains. Not about responsibility. And the third way that we blame is we become heroes, and that's when we blame ourselves, and we try to resolve the situation by saying, well, if only I had done something else, it would have worked out. And so I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to solving the problem. I'll work through this. And very often, this is very common for people in leadership, for pastors, and people in the social service world. It's sort of like, I'll hero through it. It's my fault. Let me see if I can fix it. Churches are famous for falling into these victim discussions. Like most churches, attendance is now down, right? Donations are down. Churches are closing. So in the first case, the congregation might point out that, well, we live in a secular society. The trends are everywhere. It's not just us. Plus, we have busy lives, and church is competing for our busy lives. So we're going to keep doing what we're doing, but we might fail, but it's not really our fault. It's current events. It's the culture. It's the world outside. Another strategy a church might have is the church board will place blame, and very often it's on the minister. If the minister just preached better sermons, was more engaging with members, was nicer, wore better clothes, did more activities outside of the worship service, we're convinced the church would grow. And so the church finds a villain to blame, in this case, the minister. This happens very often, and soon the minister is fired, a search begins for a new one, and the cycle repeats itself, and churches are puzzled why they can't find a new pastor. And then the third one is the minister blames himself. He's not preaching good sermons, so he needs to really up his game. He needs to work harder on the sermons, and everybody wants something different, so he's going to work harder, longer, work through the weekend, work at night, work through his day off. He's going to announce a new Bible study. He's going to double down on counseling hours. So in this case, the minister heroes the situation, blaming himself. Well, after 6 months, the minister joins the great retirement that's taking place of clergy who are leaving, and he points out that he's got high blood pressure, obesity, and can't sleep, and the pressures of the job that never really paid well were so demanding, and the church starts a replacement process, but finds it hard to find somebody. So in this church scenario, we see the three ways we blame: declaring ourselves victims by pointing out villains, or we blame ourselves. All in the end, we make things worse because we never really took responsibility for the situation. When we play victim, when we don't take responsibility, we are powerless. We put all the power out there in the world. It's all those things that we can't control. When we look for villains, which is our most popular reaction, we do just what Jesus warns us against. We sin by refusing to take responsibility. We just need to defeat those villains. When we decide to hero, we set ourselves up for failure, exhaustion, and burnout. We remove the responsibility of everybody else in the scenario and their role to play, not helping them. So how do we move from blaming events, others, and ourselves to taking responsibility? Well, the first step is very hard. It means we have to give up on being right, demanding to be right. We all want to be right. And we have to replace that with being curious. So if we can shift from, I'm going to be right about this too, I'm going to be curious about that, we can shift out of the blame culture. The next thing to do is realize that the world that we think we know all the answers for, and if it just did our solutions and it just operated the way we want, is an illusion. Newsflash, the world will not play out the way you think it should. In fact, if you've ever tried to even plan a single week of your life and just write out every detail, this is how it's going to go, it's going to be a perfect week, you'll be surprised on day one when it doesn't work out the way you imagined it. So if the world and the people in it are not going to behave the way we want them to, we could accept that reality. That doesn't mean we become passive about injustice or need to change. It simply means that we shift from self-righteous fixer to curious change maker. So here's where the shift gets uncomfortable. What if the world and the people acting in our lives are doing exactly what they should be doing? What if they are doing the right thing? What if we let go of our rigid plan for the world? Last fall, I watched this when we had our famous Buddhist monk visit our church for a question and answers session. You can watch it on video. Venerable Pun Yung joined me for a Q&A session with the group that came. And a lot of the questions were life questions that he is used to answering from audiences. And he very much had this view of the world, which is people would say, this is the situation, I'm the victim here, and this isn't working, and these people are behaving badly. And he would always come back with the answer, well, the world, as you see it, is exactly doing what it should be doing. And this just brought really puzzled look on the American audience that is convinced that the world needs fixing, and we actually know how to fix it. We have the solution. If the villains would get out of the way, we could do it. Another questioner asked a question about being canceled for cancel culture, and he was fairly abrupt with her, just saying, comparing her to Jesus, and he said, well, Jesus was crucified and was murdered. Do you think your situation compares to his? It's not so bad. So again, he was basically challenging the audience, get out of your victim culture and shift to what you can do. It was fascinating to watch the culture and the shift. But with Buddhism, I think they do understand this concept that the world is what it is, and we should come to terms with that. So when we take 100% responsibility in all situations, we ask ourselves different questions. We say, what role am I playing in this situation? What can I do? What's in my control? It means shifting and placing blame to over there to taking responsibility over here. And when we do that, we can be involved in solving the world's problems, but we should approach those problems with incredible caution. Our perfect solution, even if we got it done the way we wanted, will probably not be the perfect solution. We may create new challenges. That often happens. So if we can shift from assuming that we know what has to be done to fix everything, and instead we shift to curiosity, this is a challenge in front of me. What can I learn from it? We can really see things differently. Two of Swedenborg's insights are really helpful here. First, he sees the physical world that we're in right now as almost like a spiritual training period. It's like we're in this is the gym, this is the school of life, and we're developing our souls. And we're doing it to the degree that we learn to love others. And so that means that in every situation that's coming up, our job really is to see, how do we grow? How do we grow? How do we become more loving? How do we become more compassionate? And the second insight from Swedenborg that's helpful here is that he describes this kind of very beautiful image that in every one of our life situations, all of our crises, kind of like the song that we played today, that God is with us. And that force, and God force, the angelic force, the force for good, is always seeking to move us toward the good, no matter what's going on. And so few of us really have the faith to tap into that amazing force. We say it's true, we say God is with us, but if we can really tap into it, it can be very powerful. It's quite heartwarming that he describes that he sees people out there loneliest, and that's when their guardian angels are the closest. So it's humbling to begin with the fact that we are likely wrong in the way we see current events, and our simple solutions may or may not solve it. It's more likely that we have a small sliver of clarity of what's going on. What might seem to be a disaster that we've decided is a disaster could be a good thing. Here's a fun story from the life of Church of the Holy City. I asked Annabelle if I could share the story because it kind of highlights it. Annabelle Park, for those of you who don't know, is our church president. And I met her at a conference in Seattle in 2016, and she lived in Silver Spring, Maryland, and she said, I'm going to come to church. And like everybody who says they're going to come to church, I was sure she was not going to come to church. She had told me she had a bad experience with church, her Southern Baptist church experience, and so forth. But she showed up, and she kept coming. And then there was the election of 2016. It did not go the way she wanted. That's putting it nicely. And she says that she kept showing up more and more because of the results of the election, and that and she became an integral part of the church. So this really terrible event, it looked like you would say it was a disaster, I think, had this effect that she became more involved with church. She got involved. She surprised me one day by saying she'd serve on the board. She got on the board. Our board chair resigned. She agreed to be vice president. Our board president died of cancer. Helen Ciaris passed quickly of cancer. And then Annabelle becomes board chair. And through the pandemic and some major negotiations on behalf of the church, she played a critical role. It's fair to say that Church of the Holy City would not be in the situation it is had we had not had the election of 2016. So was it the worst thing that could have happened? So that's just an example of just one event in the life of this church where that's how you interpret things, but you just never know. I'll give another example that happened to me this week. So the pastor is getting ready and preaching a sermon, and then you have life experience affect you as a pastor. And so as a lot of you know, I've been working on this training that bridges the gap between people of different viewpoints and diversity training called cultural translation. And I've been putting a lot of effort to it. And then recently, a really exciting news, a major funder, a major partner all came together and said, we're going to put these large resources into this model. And I was very excited because I was sure now this was the way to scale the solution, could have national impact. And these are national players. And I spoke with both the partners, and they were just enthusiastic as could be. And so last week I got the news that the partnership, as imagined, is not going to happen. And so I just really paid attention to how I felt when I got the news. I was surprised, could say blindsided, disappointed. And then I noticed a few things within myself. My heart rate increased. I felt anxious. I felt confused. I felt the reflex of uncertainty. And immediately I went to the 3 blame areas in my mind, right? First, I thought, this is not supposed to happen. I'm a victim of the circumstances. I felt blindsided. So events. Next, I looked for the villains. And in my mind, I thought, these partners, I relied on them. We talked. They didn't come through. They're not keeping their promises. I could blame them. And then in the next conversation, I found myself looking for ways for me to just keep going. So I started talking about ways I could keep this going myself without the proper support. And that the burden would be on me, gang. I'll take it on. I'll do it. What was I doing? I was essentially blaming myself. I was heroing. And frankly, I would have burned out in a very short time with that strategy. Humpty Dumpty wasn't coming back together again. But you can see I ran through all those scenarios in my mind, and then I shifted to 100% responsibility. And I asked myself, what if this is exactly the right thing to happen right now? What if that plan that I had was not the best? And then I thought deeper about it, and it got even more fascinating. I said, what if I never really wanted that solution to happen? Whoa, hold it. I was just angry that the solution didn't happen, but maybe I didn't really want it. Maybe it wasn't the right one. What new door could open that's a better solution? Now, here's where the faith part comes in with our tradition. I asked myself, what if God is working with me on this? What if God sees a better plan? What if the failure of this particular plan is the foundation for something much better? I shifted, literally shifted. The energy, my body shifted, my mindset shifted, and fear lifted. The fear of, I've got to have this my way and it's got to be right. And so within a short period of taking responsibility, I came to believe that this is all for the good, which is really, truly what I believe. I didn't talk myself into it. That's really where I am. And I remembered a passage from Romans chapter 8 that says, we know for those who love God, all things work together for the good, for those who are called according to his purpose. So I believe that's true, and I find it very reassuring. I think God is working in all of your lives, my life, for the good. We can just tap into it. So, no matter how things are going, if you're following your purpose, it will work out for the good. That's where faith comes in. We have the faith to believe that's true. Well, I encourage you to try this out. Next time you find yourself blaming events or that villain or yourself, stop, acknowledge it. Now shift and ask yourself, what's my responsibility? Now be careful, don't blame yourself, because that's another form of blame and you're just going to take it on. But just be curious with it. I'd like to close the sermon by reading from a passage from the book, which I thought was a good summary of the concepts. It says, this is the commitment. I commit to taking full responsibility for the circumstances of my life, my physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. I commit to supporting others to take full responsibilities for theirs. And then it goes on later. Instead of asking who's to blame, conscious leaders ask, what can we learn and how can we grow from this? Conscious leaders are open to the possibility that instead of controlling and changing the world may be just the way it is. This creates huge growth opportunities on a personal and organizational level. So, are you ready to give this a try? Next time you don't get your way, things do not work out, try reframing it. Maybe say a short prayer. God, help me to see what I should learn right now, and help me to shift toward the good. Or, what can I learn from this? How can I be curious? Taking full responsibility requires self-awareness, and that's the beginning of all spiritual growth. We must stop pointing out the splinters in the eyes of others and look within ourselves. It's hard work. And we have well-worn paths in our brains toward blaming whenever things don't go the way we think they should. But try to resist it. Try to resist blame, shame, and guilt. And be curious. Take responsibility and see what you can learn. Amen.